Welcome to Upship, the Airship History Podcast. I'm Nick Rogers, your captain on this long-haul flight through the fascinating history of airships, and it's great to be joined today by Max Pinucci, who is the co-founder and head of design at OceanSky Cruises and the CEO of MB Vision. Max, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the podcast today.
My pleasure, Nicholas, and thank you and thank everyone to listen what's next.
Exactly. Well, you have a very interesting sort of CV when it comes to aviation and airships, but your background, if I'm correct, is in design. So how did you become interested in aviation, and specifically, how did you become interested in airships?
It's a funny story because, as you said, I'm a designer, industrial design, and professor in industrial design. And what is funny is that my family, no one of my family flew. They were all scared about flying. But I still have memories of my past, of my grandmother, especially my grandfather, that was telling me the stories. They were living in Africa. They lived in Africa for 20 years. And my grandfather saw the first aircraft and the first airships in the beginning of the last century. So, and these stories fascinated me. I was a kid, and because I was often sick, as it happens when you're a kid, I was reading a lot, and so many of my readings were about aviation. I was making kits, I was making flying models, and I started loving heroes like Umberto Nobile and his story of fantastic flights to the north. And that's why I started loving first the aircraft and then the airships.
So, like so many people with aviation, it started as a childhood passion that you've never been able to shake. It's so often the way, isn't it? So before we talk about OceanSky Cruises specifically, why don't we talk about some of your other airship-related projects? So you've done quite a lot in the field. You designed and wrote what I think is one of the most beautiful airship books ever, Airships Designed for Greatness. Now, how did that particular project come about?
Here too, Nicholas, is more about my profession. I'm a designer, so I'm more used to put together great people and to follow a vision than to be an author in my bedroom at night writing things. So I started this project in a completely different way. I just gathered around me the best experts, and that I started meeting simply on Facebook. I mean, on the social media. So instead of posting pictures of cats, we started talking about airships. And I gathered these people with around a dream to make a book. Illustrated, and the book, a timeless book that was designed as a piece of design and wrote as a film. So where the star were the airships, and where a lot of people contributed, bringing their own knowledge, because it's hard to be an expert. You know, when I started, they told I was really scared. I said I'm not an expert, and my mentor Andreas Horn. He was one of the greatest experts in the world. He said, "Oh, Max, don't worry. An expert is not the one who knows; is the one that wants to know. So go ahead and work." And now I'm very happy about the results. The book is a kind of an icon in the field.
Yes, it absolutely is. And I wondered, in doing the book and in drawing and realizing all these airships, did a particular favorite airship emerge from a design perspective?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, the more I'm in love with the airships designed for a specific purpose. Like, let's say the ones for the polar expeditions, they are not the biggest, they are not the fastest, but they were intended for missions. And that's why I like the L-59, the famous LZ-104 that flew from Bulgaria to Africa, making the longest flight for 50 years, 96 hours. And again, was designed for being used because it was intended after landing to be completely dismantled, using the aluminium for barracks, using the engines for generators, the radios, the radio station, and the fabric for making uniforms. So that's a great example of design. I mean, not just the airship itself and his, his mission, but the huge and broad, let's say, concept around the airship itself.
Yes, that's interesting. And of course, on the podcast, we will be covering the L-59 flight in due course as well. But you mentioned Umberto Nobile and the North Pole airships, the polar mission airships that he captained. That brings me on to one of your other projects, which is a board game, Airships North Pole Quest, in which players have to effectively race to reach the North Pole. It's an interesting project. Why did you choose the Arctic as the setting for a board game about airships, and how did you find the process of actually developing a board game?
Well, the Arctic is fascinating. That try to reach the poles. The first exploration by aircraft started in 1897 when André tried with a balloon. Swedish explorer tried to go with a balloon. So the North Pole was a kind of the last spot, white spot on the map. No one knew about what was there. They were thinking about peaks. There were peaks, there were mountains, there were lakes, there were tropical islands. Everyone was, and the idea of going there with an aircraft and looking from above was amazing at that time. So that's why I was so interested in this. And this also put together the game itself. To me, was a kind of a symbol of my work, because it was the best way to put on your head the hat of a captain and physically try, because in the game you have money, you have to be a manager, you have technology, geography, geopolitics, you have to be a commander, you have to listen, you have to hire the crew, you have to save your money. And what is good is that the game was somehow made like the book. I mean, involving experts, real experts, like meteorologists, like geographers, like mathematicians, because we wanted to make this a game, but as close as possible to the book in terms of realism.
So players in the game are trying to sort of recreate how high profile these missions would have been. And you mentioned geopolitics; these were massive political sort of enterprises, weren't they? Especially with with Umberto Nobile and some of the Italian Norwegian sort of rivalry there. It's an interesting story. But let's move on then to OceanSky Cruises, which I think is one of the most interesting companies working in the airship field at the moment. It's a Swedish company, and you're not going to design and manufacture your own airships, but you will operate other airships and run luxury, sustainable airship cruises to destinations like the North Pole, which is a very exciting prospect based on what we've just been talking about. So where did the idea for OceanSky Cruises come from, and what's the mission of the company?
The mission of the company is to let me try to make a step back. Why we started this work is because basically both me, but especially the founder Carlos Kalavacek has a kind of a family tradition in airport transportation. He's a commercial pilot. His father was having a company in cargo operation. So the idea of a sustainable aviation is something that, of course, is growing and growing day by day. But as Nordic people, they have even a stronger attitude of making clean, of taking care of the environment. So that's why the OceanSky was born around this idea of making clean the aviation. And the airship is the best mean of transportation, because it needs really a portion, a fraction of the energy that a normal plane needs for flying. So that's why Scandinavia, that's why Carlos Karlavacek, that's why Airships, and that's why OceanSky. And the idea started around cargo operation and then moved through to the passenger transportation, and especially experiential tourism. And there is a lot of reason behind of this. So the mission, of course, is to generate a new way of flying through a new generation of aircraft.
I feel you mentioned sustainability. I feel that airship people have been talking about sustainable aviation for years and years and years, because we know that airships are the most sustainable form of aviation. But it does seem that only recently is the rest of aviation actually catching up with that discussion. And now I think airships find themselves kind of on the cutting edge of that sustainable aviation discussion. And a company like OceanSky Cruises would be would be an extremely important player in that overall sustainable aviation discussion. So how important is sustainability to OceanSky? It sounds like it's really at the core of what you're trying to do.
Of course, sustainability is not just a keyword; is a kind of an attitude. I'm also teaching at the university, and I have to I have to talk with my students, because they will be the protagonist of the next 50 years of life on this planet. And of course, we are working also for them, because I'm a son of the Cold War. That means that one of the worst periods in terms of tensions, but also one period that gave to the aviation a lot of records. But now we are trying to face different challenges, and the sustainability is one of them. We talk about sustainability, but sustainability is not just, let's say, fuel. The fuel is only a portion of the problem. The biggest problem are infrastructures, because if you need to build airport, you need to build roads, then you need to build a lot of things. When you think about rails and trains, you think that trains are green. Oh, they're extremely green in terms of fuel, but they're very bad in terms of the impact. So that's why the combination of airships actually don't need infrastructure, basically, and the fact that they can fly with a fraction of the energy that an aircraft needs. That's what pushed us into this direction. The real sustainability, not just the typical keyword.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, airships of the kind that we're discussing, you need a field. You don't need I was at Heathrow Airport recently, and I wouldn't hate to think the amount of concrete that went into constructing the runways and the stands and all that. But airships would operate from a grassy field. There's very little infrastructure, at all. So OceanSky will be high-end, experiential, luxury travel. What would it be like to actually fly with OceanSky Cruises?
We often have in mind that luxury is something bad. When you think about luxury, you think about excess, you think about ostentation, you think about eccentric people. In reality, thanks to the fact that we started talking and meeting enlightened people, rich people, that enlightened ones, we changed our mind, and we thought that working for this kind of, let's say, experiential luxury travel would have been a kind of a spring to bring back the airship. Imagine about electric cars. Electric cars existed in the past since 100 years, but until now, until Tesla, let's say, until 2009, they were more intended for city use in the city, for use as trucks or as vans. They were intended for humble works. When Tesla proved that it was possible to make a Ferrari with electric engines, everything changed. The paradigm changed. The people say, "Oh my God! So an electric car can be cool." not can be for dumb people or for stupid users. And this brought a fresh air into the segment. The same is for us. If you want to talk about cargo transportation by airship, it's not sexy at all. But if you think about, you can go to the North Pole today with an airship that is designed with new materials, new technologies, new electronics, new avionics, and everything. This can bring to the passenger a completely different way of traveling, safer, always under control by a lot of devices, but having the feeling of being explorers, of being adventurers. That's why they immediately accepted our stimulation, our challenge to make a new kind of a different kind of different way of traveling, and a mean of transportation that was coming from the past. It's a strange combination, but is exactly as Tesla did, basically.
And so you say it's a springboard. So it's the luxury experiential travel is a starting point in a wider journey. And you're choosing the North Pole, I take it, because it's high. It would be a hugely high profile flight. You'd be one of those sort of eyes of the world on you moments, wouldn't it?
It's a symbol. It's this symbol by definition of sustainability. I mean, it's the most delicate environment in the world, and it's something that we're losing because it's the ice is shrinking every year. So it's something that is going to an end, hopefully not, but it's a kind of a symbol. That's why the North Pole is a kind of not just a journey; it's a kind of a cathartic journey, because you can reach let's say the most the farthest place on Earth, but in a very respectful way.
So talk us through the flight, because this will be the first flight that you operate will be sort of expedition to the North Pole. What will it be like for passengers on that flight?
Well, the journey will start from the Svalbard Islands.
Svalbard got a very long history of polar airship.
I mean, another icon of the history of exploration, and especially an icon of the history of airships. And then you fly, and you can explore, you can look around, it's a kind of a slow and low experience. And what is good with airship, we don't have any limitation. We can fly 50 meters above the ice. And we know that the airship, the North Pole is flat, so we don't have obstacles, and this can help us to give the passenger to the highest experience in terms of enjoying the journey, not the destination. We're not going to the North Pole. We're making a kind of cruise in the sky, above the ice, in the wildest place on Earth, but leaving the smallest footprint ever. So and that's why it's important for them to understand the story, understand the technology, understand. So there will be a kind of a guided journey where our crew will entertain them, also telling these things, also let them enjoying, and then the airship can bring equipments for exploring a bit. We can land. We don't need any specific airport, so we can land on the ice, and they can even they can even walk on the ice. So it's a kind of a cathartic journey. It's a kind of magic one.
So the passengers will go from sort of sipping their martinis and watching the scenery unfold beneath them to actually landing, putting on their equipment, and walking actually on the ice itself.
Yeah, that's of course the design is part of plays a huge role because the airship is weight limited, but it's not space limited. So the cabins we designed are intended to give the maximum space to the passenger for them to enjoy this flight in a completely different way. We're squeezed in planes. What we see in a plane is the seat of your neighbor, and you look through a small window that sometimes is also unreachable because we have a couple of people in the middle. So,
or here, if you say the wing, you can't see anything at all.
Exactly. Here you have a huge possibility of having panoramic windows, of having bars and restaurants on board, of having space for yoga, or having space for your private bedroom. So it's a completely different way of traveling that is closest to the old way of traveling with ocean liners in the past. Then there is nothing compare. It's not comparable with the actual way of flying.
Yes, and it's interesting. I think I did a TEDx talk about airships recently, and the question that people came up to me afterwards the most with is, what was it actually like to fly on the Graf Zeppelin or the Hindenburg? I don't think people have any frame of reference for that. And it's one of those things, I imagine, that if you don't experience it directly, you can't really explain what it's like. So it'll be a completely different way of traveling for people.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things. I have a very close friend, Dan Grossman. He's one of the most famous historian in airship, and he made a comparison between how to fly an airship in the 30s and how to travel with an ocean liner. And he was saying that basically at that time, passengers were saying that the airship was the best way of flying, best way of moving, because it was a kind of a seamless travel without any turbulence, without any rolling, without and where you can open the windows and look outside. And at the opposite, in the ocean liners, there was a nice story that was saying that when you start sailing with an ocean line, you think that you are dying because of the rolling. And at the end, then you want to die because you have enough of this rolling, especially in the bad weather. So today we know how to fly because we have airships. The Zeppelin NT is flying daily from Friedrichshafen. So we know the British skyship flew around the world basically in the last 10, 20 years, 30 years. But we still have to try to fly in style and to live on board. That's something that's completely different. It was a great challenging, but as a concept, and both professionally for me, because being head of design, you have to imagine how to travel, how to live on board, not how just to sit and work.
Yes. Well, so you touched on that a little bit. Obviously, your background is design. You are head of design at OceanSky Cruises. So what role is good design playing in how you're thinking about OceanSky and about the kind of experience that people will have on board?
Again, design is extremely broad in these things. Since the 70s and 80s, we started bringing. The design was a kind of a added layer to the technicalities and to the engineering. And now it's different because we can lead the way to the engineering, and starting from another completely different point of view. It's not the aircraft, it's the passenger. The passenger is the heart of the aircraft, not the wings. So we need to design the wings for the passengers and not design the passenger in order to be squeezed into the plane that is perfect. So we need to work on the experience, and we need to work on what is called the human-centered design. And this was our challenge, to make human a long sausage filled by helium that is bouncing in the sky. So how to maximize these things? And also for these things, we involved a lot of people, including my students, with a lot of brainstormings, a lot of collecting a lot of information, a lot of materials, and then slowly the cabins and the corridors and the lounges and the restaurants emerged from this out of this huge preparation work. I have a friend that is a disabled pilot, and he lost his legs, but he fly aerobatic planes and was involved in the team just because he brought us the experience of people that love to fly. So not just following the rules, but let disabled people to enjoy as much as possible together with lucky people, let's say, the same experience. So that's the difference of engineering and design in the sense, and the combination of both hopefully will be the formula for a different way of traveling.
That's really interesting. And how are you working with different companies across the aviation field generally?
Again, I mean, I'm in aviation now since 25 years, and I'm still here. I'm still working very hard for my customers, and they can work with even with competitors because of two reasons. First, the design is such a broad field. So sometimes I work with HMI, that means human-machine interface, is the way you see the commands, you touch the levers, you look at through a display, or you can make the cabins, or you can make the seats, or you can make the shape of the stick. I mean, there's plenty of different let's say, challenges. And my role is a kind of a connector of competencies. I connect experts and I release, let's say, experiments and knowledge. And I also think that more you work with, I mean, the competition is something extremely positive. Competition comes from the Latin cum petere. That means running together. Doesn't mean to make war. It means to run together to kind of for a mission or for something new, let's say. So that's why I really love to work with as much companies as possible in order to help them, the sector, and my knowledge to grow.
Well, it's interesting. I interviewed Thibaut Prue from Flying Whales on the last bonus episode, and we had an interesting discussion partly about the fact that really there's a whole new sector and a whole new industry being created by a number of companies, and the importance of people working together to help set that sector up, because it is brand new, really. Airships have been around for well over 100 years, but modern airships will be completely new, and there'll be new challenges that everyone will have to face together to overcome. So it's an interesting challenge.
I have a little thing, a little episode about flying whales. It's very funny because I went to Paris to visit the company, and I've been lucky to be asked to fly the simulator of the airship. So I was flying the simulator, and the engineer in charge of the simulator was treating me very as it was a friend. So it was very, very warm, very nice with me. So I said, "But did you meet before?" So of course, I translated your board game in German. You see how this, and it's a very kind of a very small field where people are in touch, and they are all passionate. They're driven by a strong passion, and that's what I really love of this field. That most of them are really, they are first passionate and then engineers or designers or pilots.
Yes, well, it's one of those things. The airship bug, it gets in you, and it's very difficult to move away from it, isn't it? It just sticks there. What's next then for OceanSky Cruises?
Of course, we have all these things are somehow still confidential, of course, but I can say that we are planning new routes, that we are planning new design, because also the design is kind of a key factor for us, because we can, being independent from manufacturers, we can work on as a bridge between the operations and the passengers. And also another interesting thing is the operation itself, because another thing we are studying now is to make the operation working as in the smoothest and safest way. So we have a kind of a subtasks in OceanSky. One is to design new experiences, and other is to design really physically the new cabins, new components, and also new way to operate the airships.
Well, we shall watch with interest developments with OceanSky, and the very best of luck with the company. It's, as I said, I think it's one of the most interesting companies in the field at the moment. But as well as airships, as we discussed, you're also interested in other aspects of aviation, and I couldn't interview you without asking about your 1930s British biplane that you fly around in the skies over Tuscany, I believe.
Oh, I started flying when I was 18, and I got my license very early. But in a several planes, but no one gave me the sensation of freedom and of, let's say, of being part of something, let's say, old and magnificent, like flying a biplane, because it's like for airships, they're coming from the same period, 30s. And they share the same feeling, that is flying slow and low. And the biplane has an open cockpit, so you can smell, you can breathe. So it's a completely different way of flying. I must fly with the scarf, goggles, and the leather jacket because I need them, not because just for fashion. It's because I need to clean my glasses when I'm flying. It's because I need to protect my body against everything. There's wasps, let's say, because you are flying very low. So it's a complete different way of flying. I was born with the myth, if you remember, of films like Out of Africa, where flying above the rift in Kenya. So the idea one day of fulfilling this amazing, completely different way of flying, where just landing a biplane is a mess, because you have a wing below you, another one is above you, you have the engine in front of you, you don't see nothing. and
right place.
Just landing, when you land and you touch the ground, you hear the noise of the grass touching the wheels. Oh, it's perfect. You don't have to go too far. You just park the bike and say, "Oh, I did it." So it's a completely different way of enjoying the flight.
And what kind of aeroplane is it?
This is a kind of a strange plane. It's called as a name that is longest than the plane itself. It's called Sherwood Ranger Tiger Cub, and is the only plane I think that was named after a pub.
After a pub, we like
it's a pub in Norfolk, and it's a plane that was designed in the 80s. Following the drawings of a biplane of 30s, and was intended to be built by home builders. And this plane was built in Norfolk by a gentleman owning a beautiful castle in Norfolk. So has a story in the story. And I met my best friend, Stephen Briggs, is a British gentleman that lives in Tuscany, one day because we met in the sky. I was flying my plane, he was flying the biplane. I got close to him, and I started waving my wings to say hello. And we met in the sky. And now I'm so proud that I became, a great friend of Stephen. And I also had the possibility to share with him this fantastic plane that is really tube, fabric, and wood. And it's kind of a dream. He taught me how to fly this plane, and then one day he gave me a push, hit my helmet and say, "Okay, you can go." And after this moment, really, my pilot life changed completely.
That's fascinating. And how many people can say that they met in the sky? That's wonderful. So, what other projects do you have in the pipeline?
A lot. From my professional point of view, and a lot of projects in aviation. Now in these days, and I'm going next week to EBACE Geneva for the biggest fair in aviation, for commercial aviation. Then I'm going to go to Farbro. That I'm going to have several conferences about airships and seaplanes. Seaplanes are the other passion I have, and But in terms of airships, what is next is a new exhibition that I'm designing and going to set in Yambol, in Bulgaria, in the Regional Museum of Yambol, Regional History Museum of Yambol, because Yambol was a protagonist of one of the most interesting episodes. I mean, the flight from Yambol to Sudan and back of an airship in November 1917. And in Yambol, we are designing an exhibition that talks about airships and has a special focus on L-59 and the relationship between Yambol and the history. Then going to take the occasion to present a new book that's called Art Book, Airships Art Book, that is a kind of a cousin of the Airship Design for Greatness, because it collects another 16 profiles, never published before, profiles of airships. But in this case, I pushed on the storytelling more than on the techniques. So I invited people to write, 16 people, to write about their own airship, sometimes just because they were expert, sometimes because they were relatives of people that flew. So I have a relative of a guy, a rigger, that disappeared in the North Pole with the Italia airship. I have the grandson of an officer that flew in the north with the airships during the Great War. So it's a kind of a story. I love the storytelling. There is a huge story behind the airship. No one knows, and I really want to bring the stories to.
There's a wealth of stories in the history of airships, and that's something I'm trying to bring out on the podcast as well. There's all these characters and episodes and just fascinating, exhilarating stories that are not being told anymore. So it sounds like a really interesting book.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of friends they're writing stories, novels about airships, and I'm of course joking. I tell them that it's hard to write a novel about airships because the real story of airships is sometimes so amazing that no one writer could have written stories like these. If you think about meetings to the North Pole with submarines and airships and crossing of Atlantic with cats, there's plenty of incredible stories. And the fact that people are just focused on the Hindenburg and the explosion is something that makes me very sad.
Yes.
That's why I'm pushing so hard on trying to push people to discover the glory and also about the funny episodes, not necessarily the most, let's say, dramatic, but also the funniest episodes around the airships. And the fact that at that time, people were relying on them, not on aircraft.
Exactly that. Well, Max, thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. And I wish you all the best with OceanSky Cruises and all the other projects that you're working on.
Thank you, Niklas, and many and greetings from the OceanSky team and from the Envision team, and thanks for these interviews. It was really nice to talk with you. Thanks, Niklas.